Good morning and welcome to Behind the Screen. I am JM, your host of this show where we just kind of step behind the GM screen, talk about things that inspire, things that lessons I've learned from gaming, doing book reviews, RPG reviews, talking about gaming and what makes this unique experience of ours so, so cool. So today we're going to talk about my three T's for making combats interesting. Yeah, Bob, you are going to find out that mystery. We had a great session of Deadlands last night. It will be up on YouTube later today. Really looking forward to that. The first episode of the podcast, the AP audio that we just ripped from the video, is now alive on Spotify and on iTunes under the Iconic Production logo, umbrella, oeuvre, if you will. Bob, I am really excited. I don't know if I told you this. I'm ordered in the Pathfinder. So Savage Worlds did a Pathfinder adaptation, Savage Worlds Pathfinder, that also comes with the Rise of the Rune Lords adventure path. So they basically are taking the rules we're playing with in Deadlands and they're applying it to sort of Gygaxian fantasy and taking a really great adventure. I'm really looking forward to seeing how it all comes in. I'm going to do an unboxing on behind the screens from one of those. So a couple of housekeeping things before we start. First of all, Rich, I have not gotten back to your great comments. I will run through them actually on a video. I was not aware. So when we talked about Thieves World 2 episodes ago, I was not aware of all of the controversy surrounding Marion Zimmer Bradley. I know her from Thieves World. I know a lot of friends loved her Mists of Avalon series, but I really appreciate you bringing that to my attention. And I actually have some friends who are a little bit closer tied to the Thieves World scape, if you will, and I'm talking with them about that. And I'm preparing a video. I didn't do a verbal response because I think that it may be worth talking about on behind the screens. I'm going to try and get some information that I can share from them. They've been in the Thieves World both in front of the books and behind the scenes. So I'm trying to get some information. Do not worry, I promise to address what you talked about, and I really appreciate you bringing that up and to my attention. Now, the other thing we're going to talk about is we're going to start a new series next week that I think should be fun. Some of you, we really talked about how, things can inspire us, and games are cool, and they have these different mechanics. But what does it actually mean? Because if you've listened to the Grand Campaign, we talk about how any role-playing game, until you actually get players and a GM and dice, sort of exists in this abstract state. Here are the rules as written, and what does that mean? The game actually is when the rules and the dice and the players and the GM, the relationship, the experience of role-playing, it has to be experienced. It can't just be sort of intellectually understood. In a lot of ways, it's like religion. I'm writing a paper on the liturgy of RPGs, and the fact that it doesn't exist up here. It's not just beliefs. It's about actions and doing, and that's kind of how we develop. I'm not equating the two, but I'm just saying there is sort of a parallel there, a fractal breakdown of what's true above is kind of true below. Bob, I do want to actually get you in a Pathfinder one shot. Maybe after Savage Worlds finishes up, we'll run a short Pathfinder 2 adventure on the channel just so you can give it a shot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at 6 different genres over the next couple of months. We'll take breaks as book reviews or new products come in or something interesting happens in gaming. We're going to start with heroic fantasy, the genre of heroic fantasy. And we're going to look at the books that really inspired it. And I'm hoping that we get great commenters like Rich, who took our Thieves World, kind of the anthology fiction, and gave a ton of extra examples. George R. R. Martin's Wild Cards ends up being more of a mosaic where he kind of edits it together. But Rich gave a ton of great other options to look at if you like this idea of multiple authors kind of working into that. So we're going to look at like the literary giants, if you will, at least from my opinion, of the genre of fantasy, the games that that take their notes directly from that, and then how do we replicate that experience in gaming? Because honestly, we all take the things that we love and we put them into our games, right? I love Westerns, but obviously not as much as Shane Hensley and the guys pinnacle because they produce this amazing game, Deadlands. I love the Greek myths and I love the Semitic myths, and so the Bronze Age, that's why I produce Jackals, because it is something very deeply close to my heart. But if you understand where things came from and what maybe was the foundation of the genre, it becomes easier to implement those themes, those ideas, those experiences in our games. So that's what we're going to cover for the next couple of months. I thought that'd be a cool deep dive. We're going to start with heroic fantasy, but we're going to talk about low fantasy, high fantasy, epic fantasy, and a couple of others, and kind of look at different rules and games that are around that and kind of take them apart and see what makes them really work well in this genre, or perhaps maybe not work so well. But how we can mechanically and as game masters reinforce the ideas and the ideals of the genres we're trying to emulate. But today we're talking about combat. So here's the thing. I have a buddy, Richard, who's on the Grand Campaign, and he loves to say, combat is role-playing if you're doing it right. And I think it's sometimes, there's normally the debate about combat is, do I use miniatures and maps? Do I use Theater of the Mind? And if you've watched the shows on the Iconic channel, I tend to like Theater of the Mind when we're streaming. I use combat mats when I'm playing at the table with friends. I just find it easier for the chat and the viewer to keep up if we're doing Theater of the Mind. It's less focused on what's going on the table and more about the collaborative narrative space. But when you get into combat, there is a tendency, and this is my experience, my opinion, from the opinions or the experiences and opinions of those I've interacted with over my 30 plus years of DMing, things can get static. You put your minis on the board, you can do on your character sheet, the GM knows what the monsters do. If you've been playing long enough, you generally know what the monsters are going to do. And you run into sort of this... It's fun, don't get me wrong, I love combat in games, but you do sort of run into this idea of people jump into their roles, they jump into what's familiar, and they kind of run through it. And there are ways, I feel like, to ratchet up the excitement beyond just, did I hit or not? Am I going to die or not? Did I kill the thing or not? And I refer to these as the 3 Ts. When I'm planning out combats, I try and keep these 3 Ts in mind. And I can't always do all 3 of them. But as we go through them, hopefully they will help. The first is tactics. So some games are really good at helping with tactics, like 13th Age, where most of the tactics of the monster are pre-built into the way the game works. Right? You roll a d20. If you then compare the natural roll of the d20 to the monster's abilities, and you can kind of see what's going on. But even beyond that, you can use tactics to make a game far easier, an encounter far easier, or more difficult. Right? If you're fighting zombies tend not to have a lot of tactics because their intelligence is low. We're talking about creatures with at least some sort of intelligence to move around. So take wolves, for example. Pack tactics. If you're playing D&D, or you're playing Pathfinder, or you're playing, 13th Age, they all have some sort of pack attack mentality. If they are attacking, if multiple wolves are attacking one creature, they get a bonus. It's a kind of a mechanical reinforcement of tactics. But one of my favorite stories that we'll link to in the show notes is Tucker's Kobolds. This is a story from the older days of D&D where when going into the dungeon, these high-level characters, they didn't fear the monsters on the lower levels. No, they feared going through the level with kobolds. Because for whatever reason, this DM Tucker, his kobolds were operating a guerrilla warfare campaign in the dungeon against adventurers and using Navy SEAL-like tactics to take out players, even though he didn't adjust their to hit and he didn't adjust their hit die at all. They were the big threat. Now, again, you have to have reasons why this would work. A group like Gorilla. I guess my accent's a little different than yours, Bob, even though we grew up basically in the same part of the Midwest. So tactics can change that. You can, if you're like monsters that tend to use a lot of advanced tactics in my mind. guards, soldiers, hobgoblins in your F20 games, certain Takan in jackals, especially if they're being led by somebody. You'll know it when you're playing. If you think that the monsters can do something unique or have some massive tactical advantage, use it. Do they attack from an ambush? Is the site that the fight happening? Has that been specially prepared? Can they separate the party in any way? If you can separate the party, portcullis, falling rocks that create a break in a ravine, a series of traps, the floor drops out. Suddenly, the monsters who know that that's there, they use that to their advantage, and suddenly you're being attacked on two fronts, which alone creates an interesting situation. So tactics are really important. I'm one of the things that I enjoy doing when I'm running monsters that have way higher intelligence, like we're talking like, monsters with 18, 19, 20 intelligence in an F20 game, or even higher if you're playing Pathfinder or 13th Age. I go back to an old dungeon article that I love, which basically says when you're playing with, and it may have been also in the Champions rules, it might have been a superhero rule that I read once. Now my brain is telling me it came from all sorts of places. I think John Wick mentioned it either in his Pyramid articles or in his Play Dirty book. Have your players declare all of what they're planning on doing on the turn at the start of each turn. Because you know what? The Lich with a 28 intelligence is thinking so far ahead, he probably knows what the players are going to do. And that gives you as the GM time to think about what's going on. Yeah, see, Bob, splitting them up. It's, in combat, you can separate it into two battlefields. If you like we did in the Torg game at the end of the Legacy of the Nabateans, there were two fights going on because they were using this teleport pad to get to the other side. That brings us to our next T, the T of terrain. So here's the thing. With terrain, and I don't just mean like putting difficult terrain in, I don't just mean putting dangerous or impassable terrain. John, good to see you. Glad to see you back. I hope you enjoyed the Deadlands game last night. It was good to see you on there. And yes, some systems allow for the split of a party easier. However, in F20 games, if you build the encounter as normal and split the monsters as well, you can get a similar effect without trying to overwhelm your PCs. But what I mean by trade is interesting terrain effects. Crystals that exude a magical effect when you're in their area. Piles of rocks that the players could use to trigger a fall. The best example of this is obviously a swashbuckling movie where the chandelier alerts everyone that someone can move from the lower level to the higher level, maybe drop it on someone. Putting these things into the game early on in the game helps your player establish what's going on terrain-wise. And if your game is using something like Bennies in Savage Worlds, or Possibility in Torg, or Hero Points in 7C, the goal is to get your players to be willing to spend these resources to create their own terrain effects. Now, you may be thinking this adds a whole layer of complexity to your game, because now I have to think about, what does X effect do? What does Y effect do? If I put this in here, what's the only way the players can use this? Nah. The trick is, much like, I think it was Coville that says this, your job isn't to come up with solutions. Your job is only to come up with problems, or in this case, interesting opportunities. You're fighting in a forge. Describe what's there, the furnaces that look like they can be stoked. Carts going by, or large netting of scrap metal. Describe the scenario, maybe give them one or two things that is very clear, like, hey, every 2 rounds, this gout of fire comes out of the wall. Give them something that they can work with, and then be real flexible and let them do what the players come up with. If they try to lure the monster under the stack of scrap metal to crush them, you may not have thought of that, but that's a really cool idea. Assign a target number, let it roll, see what happens. Most games have rules for incidental damage. Like if you just, this is something that's great in 13th Age. By tier, by difficulty, they have what a direct damage would do and what an indirect damage would do. So you can just spitball these things. Do whatever feels right. If you're dropping scrap metal and you're playing Pathfinder, assign a couple of D6 or D8 and roll the thing. Maybe it entangles the monster. Let your players, when they come up with a cool idea, my first thing is usually to ask them, and this is a burning wheel question, okay, but what is your intent here? If they are wanting to fiddle with the netting, don't just assign a target number. Push back on them so that you can pre-plan, oh, they don't want to damage the creature. They're hoping that the scrap metal will trap it and lock it up for a couple of rounds. That's a cool idea. I wasn't expecting that. And yeah, Bob, in designing puzzles, I think we talked about this before. Don't come up with a solution necessarily to the riddle or the puzzle. Let your players have an idea, but let your players be really flexible in that landscape. And yeah, Burning Wheels, what is your intent? I love Burning Wheel, but that's the one thing that I've definitely lifted out of that system, is always pushing back. Because here's the thing. If your player is in a... you're having a fight in a blacksmith shop, and he wants to know if they have a shovel. You can say yes, but you can also say, yeah, but what's your intent? What are you looking to do with the shovel? If you can get a little bit more out of the player, it helps you make the world feel a little bit realer by placing what the player is seeing firmly in the combat landscape. So terrain changes things. I've run games where the terrain breaks up and has randomly moved around, spinning on the map, so that the players have to move from terrain to, moving from piece to piece makes it more difficult, adds a little element of risk. You can put healing altars or altars that spawn monsters. You can put rock slides. You can put barricades up. You can have, as we talked about in the Forge, I'm thinking of, so I did not like parts of Jackson's Hobbit trilogy. And while I loved the Forge fight against Smaug in the Lonely Mountain in Erebor, I loved it not because it had anything to do with the Hobbit, and it stands out as the least Hobbity thing of the Hobbit trilogy in my mind, or one of the least. However, as a D&D fight scene, that's what I want out of the D&D movie. That was brilliant. They were interacting with the terrain. They were drawing the dragon into a trap. They realized they couldn't kill this thing, but they could at least drive it off. That's what we're talking about. Cool terrain ideas. Don't just lay out the map, put the trees or the hallways out, and think that it's done. Think about what are some interesting interactions that can be going on with this game. Another one that I love in 13th Age, because I keep coming back to that, is the way kobold traps work in 13th Age. If you're a follower of the Iconic podcast, I've talked about this forever. Essentially, when certain kobolds make attacks and their natural die roll is higher than the target's wisdom, they pushed you into a trap. And they've got a little list of D6 or D8 traps that may go off. This is brilliant. This allows the die to add another layer of complexity to the game. So if you're playing against monsters that would have laid the area with traps, you can do something like that. You can say, just get everyone's wisdom, right? The cleric is going to be less likely to step into a trap than, say, the fighter. But anytime there is a natural attack roll that is higher than the target's wisdom, add a little damage effect. Have a little trap table that says, oh, you stepped under that stone and actually, it was a spike trap that the kobolds had cleverly maneuvered you into. All of our games come with examples of traps. Pick 4 or 6 or 8 of them, put them on a list, and suddenly you have an interactive battlefield where the kobolds are now even scarier, because are the kobolds trying to maneuver me into a certain direction or not? So the last thing is timing. This is easy for me to do in 13th Age, but I've totally taken into other games. I believe it was Alfred Hitchcock who said, Two people talking at a table is pretty boring. Two people talking at a table, and I'm paraphrasing, with a bomb underneath it that only the audience can see, that's exciting. Now you have dramatic tension. If you can put a timer on a combat, it is instantly more exciting than a combat without it. If I was thinking ahead of this, I would have had a timer pop up right now, counting down to show you that, hey, what's going to happen when it reaches 0? So this can be things like, hey, every other round, every even round, gouts of fire shoot up from the geysers in the floor. This can be, guys, you have 5 rounds until the sacrifice is offered. If you can't get to the altar and stop the necromancer within 5 rounds, a demon gets summoned, the person you're here to rescue, so the fight gets harder, and the person you came to rescue is dead. If there's the sound of more monsters coming, hey, you have 3 rounds to finish these goblins off before the horn that they blew summons a cave troll. Suddenly, the group is invested in getting things done fast, and they focus because you have a timer. Volcanoes exploding, alchemical bombs exploding. Why is it always explosions in my games? Reinforcements arriving, timing because a ritual needs to be completed by a certain point or stopped. One of the things that can be very exciting is you tell the players, hey, you have to defend this point for a minute while your NPC wizard completes some sort of ritual. Okay, well, every round you add more monsters to the game. So it starts off easy and it gets harder. Your players know they don't have to kill everything. They just have to survive for 6 rounds. In the Pathfinder 2 playtest, there was a great adventure like this, where you were defending a church from waves of undead that were attacking during the night, trying to destroy the church. That's cool. That's exciting. Give your players an inn to defend for 1 night, and let them know they have to survive till dawn. Roll some dice behind the screen, but know that these encounters are going to come at certain points. You give them a timer, whether it's to survive so long, to get something done, to complete some portion of the fight, and then they can leave, or it ends, or else something gets worse, and suddenly you have ratcheted up the thumb screws on your players as they're playing. Everyone loves grenades except the people on the receiving end. Man, I'm playtesting a new Jackals-based or Clash-based sci-fi game. My favorite experience from our playtest at this point was the guy who ran out of Clash points, and the enemy threw a grenade, and everyone dove away, and the guy without Clash points kind of stood there, and the grenade went off at his feet. So yes, that is... Oh, there you go. The ox is being goaded. Yeah, that's... Oh, gourd. Yeah, that's true. So yeah, like timing, tactics, and terrain. If you can implement one of these things a fight, you're going to... I think you have a more interesting fight than you do if you just throw monsters down. Because so often as GMs, we want to make sure the monster looks cool because of all of the things in its stats blocks. These things make the fight look cool, and I think engage the players in a way that your monster casting time stop, gravity, reverse gravity, and then prismatic sphere. Just, okay, that's cool, but there's something the players can do about these 3 things. So that is my kind of thoughts on making combat interesting. Tonight on the start of the Infernus Gamble, the new arc of the Torg Eternity game, I'm going to try and use all 3 of these in a single fight at the start of the arc. So they're going to have a big fight. We're going to see how this works. In movies, one of the ones I just watched recently, The Kingsman, there is this fight in No Man's Land. It's a World War I movie. It's a prequel to the Kingsman movies, but it's not even of the same genre. It's very weird. I felt it was a fun movie. I enjoyed certain pieces of it very well. It just was Not what I expected, I think. So they have this fight. They are trying to recover a spy from no man's land between the two trenches. Germans are trying to do the same. And what they realize is if we fire our weapons, both sides will know there are people out here, and they're going to light us up with machine gun fire, and they're going to light us up with artillery. So both sides very quietly agree that this needs to be a hand-to-hand knife fight, or else everyone gets obliterated. That's using the terrain, and that's using tactics to change the rules of the game, of the encounter, to make it more interesting. Not so much a TPK, I hope not, but the group is they will be fighting, spoiler alert, some techno demons over the Nile Empire side of Istanbul. So I'm really excited to see how this goes. Some games are better at mechanically doing the timing thing. I think of Torg's drama deck. When you're using the dramatic scenes, you have the cards on the initiative kind of telling you, hey, here are what steps can be done. So maybe the ritual lasts until step B or step D, but the cards have to tell you when you get to step D. So there's a timer, but it's uncertain for anyone. The other thing I really like about the Torg initiative system in the drama deck is the fact that they give you approved actions, which are not, more often than not attacking. So they say, hey, if you do this other thing with a skill, you will be rewarded in some way. You get a possibility card. You could do that with D&D. Let's see, how would I do that with D&D? You could have a small D6 table with different skills on it. And all right, let's talk this through. Let's go back with our Forge idea. Maybe if you have a broken automaton or the minecarts aren't moving, you could say, hey, guys, if you interact with if you use the craft skill in this combat, you get inspiration. If you intimidate someone in this combat, you get inspiration. Maybe that's what you do. You come up with little tokens that give a different skill and put one more out than the number of players that you have. Pick 5 skills and say, if you use this skill in combat on your action and find a way to use it with the scene, that becomes an inspiration token for you. And that way, you get your players immediately thinking, how do I incorporate this skill into this scene to get this inspiration? I think that could be a fun way to do it. You do hero points in Pathfinder 2. You could do icon relationships in 13th Age. That could be a very interesting way. Yeah, the 13th Age escalation die, John, works kind of the same way on timing. And yeah, Savage Worlds, man, the more I run Savage Worlds, the more I am falling in love with it. I mentioned that I'm going to do an unboxing of the Pathfinder stuff when it comes in. Very excited to see how they've adapted Golarion and Rise of the Rune Lords to the Savage Worlds rule set. You can see in the back we've got our Deadlands material, some Torg stuff. Those are the 2 main games that we run here on the Iconic Production channel. So hopefully this discussion of tactics, terrain, and timing has been helpful to GMs. If you end up using any of these, please leave comments in under the video. I love reading them. I respond to them as often as I can. And if not, I will do a whole video kind of responding to them, as I plan to do with Rich's comments, so I appreciate them. If you like what we do on the Iconic Production channel, please tell people. We're running some great Deadlands. We're going to be running a lot of great Torg. We do behind the screens twice a week. This week is very busy for the Iconic Production team. We did Deadlands last night. We're doing Torg tonight. Behind the screen today, and on Thursday we have a special guest. We're going to have Ben from our Torg game, who plays Brother Block. We're going to be talking about clearance levels and how those affect the game of Torg. Now, if you're a Savage Worlds fan, this roughly corresponds to the ranks of your hero in Savage Worlds. The higher the rank you get, you get it as you gain XP. The more XP you get, the higher ranks you go. It unlocks new abilities that you can purchase with this XP. Works the same way in Torg. At 50 XP, suddenly you've gone from an alpha clearance to a beta clearance, and you have new things that are accessible. Ben and I are going to be talking about that on Thursday. Saturday, Evan and I will be talking about Sartar, the Kingdom of Heroes, here on Exploring Glorantha on this channel at 10 a.m. Central. And then on Sunday night, if you can tune in, we're going to be doing our actual play of Trail of Cthulhu, a gumshoe system that Becca will be running. So this should we got a busy week this week, but it should be a ton of fun, and I'm looking forward to it. So until next time, everyone stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming. I am JM. This has been Behind the Screen, episode 37, which is still mind-boggling to me that we are 37 episodes into this. Check out, if you haven't, go over to and follow the Pinnacle Twitch. They do a pre-show with me and one of my players before the Deadlands game starts, and they end up rating us. This week, we had a pre-interview with JD, who plays Sister May, and next week, I have it on good authority that the pre-show will be myself and Chris of Pinnacle, and the illustrious Bob Crumb. So we'll be talking about art, we'll be talking about gaming, we'll be talking about Savage Worlds and Deadlands. Please consider joining us. If you like what we do, subscribe here, subscribe on YouTube if you're listening there. Click a like button. It helps the algorithm say, hey, this is fun content that other people will do. Leave a comment. I really appreciate them. I love interacting with the fans. And then if you would like to, we have a Patreon over at patreon.com/iconicproduction. That's where kind of helps support the shows that we're doing. And it gives you access to the Discord channel where you get to chat with me, the casts of both shows, and people who just love gaming and love talking about it. So until next time, I am out of coffee. So we will have Behind the Screens on Thursday. I will see you all then. Have a good one.